Hi everybody, it's now the winter time in the UK and it's getting cold and frosty, so I thought we would make a warm winter hat that's easy to make. You don't need a pattern, and this is what I'm going to use for it. Now I've got a little bit of nice stretchy fabric here. We're going to use stretch, you don't have to for the outside, but it's going to be 2 layers for this hat. So I'm going to use this for my outer layer, and because I want it to be warm and fleecy, I'm going to use this for the inner layer. Now, you can buy fleece and things like that, but it's expensive. So I tend to buy throws that you can buy in any sort of shop that sells homewares. And this throw was, I think it was £4. And there's a lot of fabric in it, so it will do really well for what we want. But first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the sewn edges off of this throw. Right, so I've cut all the sewn edges off of this throw. Now, bear in mind, if you're using this sort of type of fleece, where it's like a teddy bear fleece, it will shed, so you will end up with a lot of bits all over the floor. So shake it out and get rid of all your bits. Now our hat, we've got to work out how big we need it. Now, because I want a cuff on the edge of the hat, I want it quite deep, and what we're going to do is work out the size we need to go around our head. Now I want about 24 inches for my head, and I want about 2 inches for seams. Now, it depends really how thick your fabric is as to how much you have for your seam allowance. And if you've got really, really thick fabric, you might want to give yourself a bit more on the seam allowance. So I'm going to make this 26 inches wide. So I'm just going to cut a snip line there. And I want it to be 13 inches deep. So I'm going to mark some more. Ooh, keep getting my head in the way. About 26 inches there. Probably easier with a pin. Chalk doesn't work very well on this, and I want it 13 deep. So there we are. You can use any stretch fabric for this. You just need a little bit of give in the fabric, which is why I'm using this throw. It's not very easy to do it on this table, I must admit. And I'll just work it out there, and work it out there. So I've got a rough rectangle like that. You can use jersey or scuba or anything for this, but you want it to be fairly thick, because obviously this is a warm winter hat. You don't want really thin jersey fabric, the type that you would use for a t-shirt. So there's my first triangle. Doesn't look very impressive so far. And then I'm going to use this fabric for my next triangle. So I want the same size again. So I'm going to lay one on top of the other. Have I got about enough that way? Bear in mind as well, this stretches all over the place. So be careful when you're laying it out. It doesn't have to be absolutely exactly the same size. So I'm going to cut across here. Right, so we've got our 2 triangles. Now what we need to do is sew these 2 together. Now we're going to sew this together so that we've got sort of a tube, and we're going to sew this together, right sides together, in the same fashion. Now with stretch fabrics, they tend to move about a lot when you're sewing. So if you're not confident, I would pin and then tack. But if you're fairly confident with sewing, you can just pin and then sew that along. Now again, because it's stretch fabric, I suggest either using a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch, because it will give you a little bit of stretch and leeway and won't pull your seams apart. So let's get some pins. Right, so I've sewn these two seams together, and you can see I've used a stretch stitch on this one, and I've used pale cotton so you can see. Right, trim your seams down so that they're not so bulky. That's that one done. And there's that one done. Okay, so they're both trimmed now. Now, what we want is we want the top sewn now. So you're going to stitch this end together and this end together, which I'll go away and do now. Right, so I've stitched that end together. So now, in effect, we've got a bag shape. So again, trim the seam so we get rid of the bulk. Oh, I haven't done that very well. And this one. Now when you're doing this top seam, always start from your other seamed end. If you start from this end, you could end up with your fabric not matching at the other end. So always start from the end that you've seamed first. Right, hokey doke. Ooh, bits everywhere. Right, so they're all trimmed and we've got our bag shapes. Right, now this one we're going to turn round to the right side. Ooh, 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 ooh. Okay, so we've got the right side this way. And we're going to push it inside this one so that we've got the right sides together. So what I've done is I've put that inside that, and we've got the right sides together. Now we're going to stitch round. So join your seam areas up here, and we're going to stitch these together, but leave a gap to turn the hat inside out. So I'm going to leave a gap here. It has to be about 2 or 3 inches. Now you might find your fabric needs easing so that it all matches up nicely and you haven't got any pleats. So we'll join up like this. But actually these fit quite nicely, so I haven't got to worry too much. That's a good thing about stretch fabric, you can sort of ease it to fit. Right, now we're going to stitch these two together, leaving that gap. So I'm going to start here and stitch all the way around, but leave a gap. So as you can see, I've stitched them together, but left my gap. So I'm not going to bother trimming that seam because I want it to be quite chunky. So now I'm going to turn the bag inside out, the right way round. push, push, push. Okay, so now you've got it this way round, and we need to push that inside. So we've got one bag inside the other bag. Get in there. Right, okay. Okie dokie, push it into the corners. Right, now we've got to stitch that edge closed. So I'm going to do that now with the machine, and so I've stitched shut. I've just used ordinary straight stitch for that, and you'll probably do a neater job when you do it. So this is how we have our hat so far. So I've got needle and thread, and I'm going to make sure that I've got my corners equaled up. So I'm just going to put a stitch through there like that, just to keep it in place. Not anything major. So just a stitch through to keep the corner on the corner. And when I've done this one, I'm going to do the second version, which is the child's version where the folds go the other way, which you can, again, you could do as a child's or an adult's. It just shows you the other way of doing the foldy over section. So there we are. So I've got those stitched, and now I'm going to stitch those to the middle. So you need to find the middle of the hat there, and I'm going to stitch that to there. Ooh. Helps if you're not doing it on a video, to be honest. And I'm going to stitch that corner to the middle of the hat like that. Oh, oh, oh. You have to sort of wiggle it about a bit. Right, let's stitch those down a minute just to show, because you're probably thinking, what on earth is she doing? What is this going to look like? But it all will be revealed. Right, so that's stitched down there. Right, so that's the front of the hat, and it's got a fold up cuff, see, and I'm going to stitch a pom-pom to it just for a bit of fun on the top like that. And you can make the cuff as wide or as narrow as you like, pull it up at the front, down at the back, whatever you like. So I'm just going to stitch that to that now. Right, so I've sewn down the sides, and I'm just going to trim the seam. Now the nice thing about this hat, there are no seams inside the hat, so you can make it very small for a baby or, you know, a toddler, and they haven't got any nasty rough seams, but it keeps their head nice and warm. Now, last time we just sewed across, but this time we're not. We need to find the middle point like that, and we're going to sew with the seam at the back. Okay, so now we're going to sew across here, and we're going to sew across here. So find your middle point like that, and then match that to your seam at the back. And now we're going to sew across here. So again, same here. Find your middle point. Put your pin in there, and we're going to sew across these two top edges. So again, once you've sewn across the top edge, trim the seam to get rid of the excess bulk. By the way, I made this up as I went along. So in case the video is a bit disjointed, I had to figure out what I was doing. There we are. Right, okay, so I'm going to turn one round the right way. And put it inside the other. Again, make sure you've got your seams matching. So that seam there to that seam there. So that's going in like that. And again, start at your seam line. Threads everywhere. And again, we need to leave an opening. So I'll leave an opening probably near the back, near your seam, about there. Now, when you're folding the ears in, you've got the seam there, so you know that that is the middle point. So you can sew to that middle point. Try and catch all the layers in. This is a really rubbish needle. I don't know where I got this from. I've obviously heated it up at some point. You can see on the end there. But we'll persevere. Perseverance is my middle name. So that end over to here. Now that the folds go the other way to the other hat. Seeing them like that. You need to just tweak it a bit. Right, so you can turn up the brim again, make it a cozy little hat. Now, because we've used fleece, this type of fleece that doesn't fray, what I can do is make a bit of a tassel for the top. So I'm going to cut a bit of fleece out. There we are. I'm going to fold it over. Straighten it up. And I'm going to snip into it. Snip, snip, snip. Like that. And then I'm going to do a run-in stitch. I've still got my needle and thread in there, so I might as well still use them. There we are. I've stitched that all the way around, and you can see that that's quite cute. So I'm going to photograph those now so you can see them properly. I hope you've enjoyed it and had fun, and please subscribe, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.